It's a sad fact of life that whenever something genuinely great comes along, a swarm of imitators isn't far behind. Nirvana's debut kicked off a grunge explosion where only about a third of it was actually listenable. Every streaming service on Earth has greenlit at least one god awful fantasy show in the hopes of recreating the magic of early Game of Thrones, and after John Wick, the action genre has spent the last decade trying, and mostly failing, to bottle lightning. And look, it's not hard to see why studios keep chasing that formula. John Wick was basically Hollywood's wet dream. Small budget, massive return. It featured an instantly iconic lead character and action scenes that people wouldn't shut the hell up about. But a huge part of its success was because of how new it felt at the time. By that point, mainstream action movies had become completely oversaturated with shaky cam and weightless CGI, often used to hide how bad the actors were at performing the stunts. But then, here comes Keanu Reeves, packing years of martial arts training and starring in a movie that delivered clean, readable action with minimal CGI. It went against every lazy trend the genre had been drowning in, and crucially, it had an emotional core tying the whole thing together. And yes, before anybody runs to the comments, John Wick was heavily inspired by Gareth Evans' The Raid movies. Yes, those movies are fantastic and you should absolutely watch them. That doesn't change the fact Wick was the first time a lot of American audiences saw this style of action, and studios jumped on the hype train almost immediately. Now, on paper, there's nothing inherently wrong with seeing a winning formula and wanting to replicate it. The problem here is twofold: saturation and laziness. Just look at how interchangeable a lot of these movies have become. Nobody stars Bob Odenkirk as a retired hitman dragged back into action to protect his family. Cleaner stars Daisy Ridley as a former military operative dragged back into action to fight Sanji from One Piece. Fight or Flight stars Josh Hartnett as a former military operative dragged back into action to protect a girl on a plane. G20 stars Viola Davis as the president, who is also, of course, a former military operative dragged back into action to fight Homelander in like a UN summit or something? I don't know, man. After a while, all these movies just start bleeding together in your mind, and nobody's kind of the perfect example of the issue. Bob Odenkirk playing against type is very fun, but once that novelty wears off, there's not really much left. It's competently made, sure, but it feels designed to be good enough rather than memorable. I couldn't even finish Fight or Flight. About halfway through, I realized I was watching a movie I had already seen 5 times before, just with a different coat of paint. And I didn't even bother with Nobody 2, but I hear it features Sharon Stone delivering a performance worthy of an award. Hey, the Razzies count as awards. And I get why this trend exists. The scripts are lightweight and highly standardized, the action can be largely handed off to stunt teams, the actors get to look cool, and the relatively small budgets mean they're very likely to turn a profit. From an industry standpoint, it makes sense, but from an artistic standpoint, not so much. What made John Wick and The Raid special is that they weren't just chasing market trends. They were passion projects from filmmakers who genuinely love action cinema. Gareth Evans and Chad Stahelski aren't exactly modern-day Kubricks, but they share an important quality. They understand that action is storytelling. They're deeply involved in how those scenes are staged, shot, and paced, which means the movies don't feel narratively hollow. The violence feels artistic and stylish. I'm not saying I need to cry while watching an action movie, but I am saying that Die Hard didn't become one of the best action movies ever by half-assing the script. If you're into indie games, this problem probably sounds familiar. An overwhelming number of them sell themselves on the premise of, oh, it's like this popular game you already love. I don't think they invented a number large enough to count how many games are trying to be like Symphony of the Night, but only a fraction of these go on to have some success, and they do it by bringing something new to the table. And that's really the bottom line here. If I want to watch John Wick, I already have John Wick. If I want to watch The Raid, I already have The Raid. Just chasing someone else's formula might give you a decent result, but never a great one. Even from a business standpoint, the formula is starting to show its age, especially with movie theaters becoming more and more expensive. For instance, Nobody 2 didn't do as well as the first movie. That's sad because there are still great action movies being made today, such as Evans's very own Havoc starring Tom Hardy and the surprisingly great Novocaine starring Jack Quaid. Audiences aren't exactly tired of action movies, but it's hard to get excited for a movie that doesn't seem excited about itself. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Have you noticed this trend in action movies? Does it bother you, or do you think it's not a problem? Let me know in the comments. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss any future uploads. Because next time, I'm going to be covering a severely underrated RPG trilogy featuring robots, turn-based combat, and dragons. Next up, the Shadowrun trilogy. See you there.